Haiti Divinity College right now, and he is helping to oversee the distance ed program for those who want to take their master's. Even the doctorate, are you in charge of distance doctor stuff too? No. But I am so pleased to have him here. If you know about this man at all, you know the one thing I want to bring out is a man's track record, a man's name. And Steve has a wonderful track record. There's no such thing as a perfect pastor, but there is a legacy and a history of caring for people, of pastoring people. And the other day we were at an association meeting, and Steve brought a presentation that gave me answers to questions I've had for over 10 years onto why churches are dying, why some are growing. And I asked him, I said, Dr. Steve, we need this information here at Hillcrest Baptist Church. And so this is your homework for the service this morning. You might have a piece of paper somewhere. I want you to write down one thing that really pops when he's talking. And I want you to come see me. I want you to call me at the office. I want you to email me. I want you to let me know what it was that distinctly either A, reminded you of Hillcrest, or really went wow to you. And really, I want to know these things. And so I'm not going to hunt you down or chase you down, but if you can send me an email, if you can give me a call at the office, I want to know how this morning's service impacted you. Because I know it impacted me, and I'm going to be taking notes today too. So we're also going to videotape this for those who are not here, and that's your homework too. So once you read this, or if you watch this, I want you to write your stuff down, and I want to hear the feedback from either A, how you've been challenged, what you think we need to do next, or those kinds of things. Pastor Steve, I know you probably could call that a while. Please enjoy the pulpit here at Hillcrest Baptist Church.
Well, it's very good to be here. And actually, with regard to what I do for Haiti Divinity College, often people say to me, what is it exactly that you do now? And it's sort of difficult to explain exactly because I have a number of things I guess are part of what I do now. I teach in evangelism and mission, but I also direct the New Brunswick Extension Program. And so I just want to say very briefly that Haiti Divinity College, we are your seminary, and we seek to carry the mission that you have given to us to carry out, which is to equip Christian leaders. And that means doing it quite differently than we did it just a few years ago. The world has changed. The way in which we deliver education has changed, and that means that the Divinity College has changed. Both our curriculum, we did a major restructuring of our curriculum about 3 years ago to make sure that the way that we're teaching people to lead in churches is going to be effective in the changing world in which we live. And also we changed the delivery method, and that means that people can take their full Master of Divinity degree, Master of Arts degree without moving to Wolfville. They can do that here in New Brunswick. Every year we have from 6 to 8 courses here in New Brunswick that allows students to be able to get the courses they need nearby, and it's been exciting. Just this past fall here at St. John, we had 23 people in the course here in St. John. There were 22 people in the course up in Oromocto. Right now we have people in courses in Woodstock, in Fredericton, in Moncton. So it's really a different way for us to deliver seminary education, but it means that we're able to equip a lot more people, not only people who are preparing to be pastors, but people who are church leaders already and really say, in order to minister effectively in this society that we live in, I need to be better equipped. I need a deeper level of understanding. And so if you're interested in that, talk to me. I'll have some brochures out in the foyer as well. I want to talk to you about church today. I want to talk to you about the way in which God calls us to carry out His mission. And He calls us as churches to do that. And we know that. And yet, as I look back over my time in ministry, I was a pastor for 27 years before I began what I'm doing now. And I look at the way in which the world has changed and the way in which churches are different. When I began the pastoral ministry, I think of how I gave leadership. I think of how worship service was structured. I think of the ways in which I related to people in the church and in the community. And I can tell you, if I did those things as a pastor today, pretty much none of it would work. It's a different visions of what a church is. I want to begin with one vision in Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, and familiar passage of Scripture. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. So that's one vision of the church, a biblical vision of the church. And as the church operated as a community of faith, we read that people were coming to know Jesus daily, regularly. The fact that they were reaching new people was part of who they were. I want to look at a different vision of the church, and it is the church that I see in Canada today. The church I see in Canada today is a declining and ineffective church. And I say that as a sociologist who studies congregations. That's my primary research interest. We live in a country where there's a shrinking number of people who identify themselves as evangelical Christians, and a consistently growing number of Canadians who say they have no religion. And if we look not just at the big picture of all Canadians who say they have no religion, and we look at people who are younger than 35, we discover that in that age group, the number of people who say they have no religion is twice as great as it is for all Canadians. In other words, churches today are reaching very few young people. And the people we are reaching in the age group are only the people who already grew up in our churches. We're not reaching that large group of people in that younger age group who have no church background or very little church background. We're not being effective in reaching people who are lost. That doesn't sound like Acts chapter 2 church to me. We see an almost total ineffectiveness in reaching those who never or rarely attend church. In fact, as I talk to people in congregations, they often seem not to even realize those people are there. I remember having a focus group in one congregation that had experienced tremendous decline. And as I sat with those people in the focus group, they said to me, well, you know, the young people have all moved away. And another person said, well, there are no children or youth in this whole neighborhood. So I went home and I just pulled up Statistics Canada and I looked at the postal code in the neighborhood where the church was. 760 people, 18 years old or less. But they said, well, the younger people have all moved away. Do we realize who is in our community? Or do we think that the people that we see around us in the pews in church, that this is it? Do we realize the people that we are not reaching, the people who are never in any church any Sunday? Among traditional congregations, there's a continuing decrease in church attendance and in church membership. And that's true really across the board. So I want now to look at two specific churches to give you a sense of how I see these two different types of churches working out. The first church is a church that I visited in 2010 as part of my research. And as I met with them, they told me about what their church had been like in the year 1990. And the reason they picked that year was because it was the year that they built their new sanctuary that seated 600 people, because that was their average attendance. In 1990, they had about 600 people coming on an average Sunday in the congregation. They had a big parking lot. They had a beautiful building. I'd asked them if they'd be part of one of my congregational studies, and they'd agreed to do that. And so I went first sort of for an initial visit, and I looked around, and there were 135 people in this building that seated 600. But I scheduled my visit when I was going to come back later in the year. I came back the second time to visit with them, and I quickly counted 85 people sitting in the pews. I said to the pastor, is this a bad Sunday? He said, oh no. He said, that many people have left since you were here last time. They're a church that was declining. And they were really a church filled with very fine people. Pastor's sermon was excellent. He clearly was concerned about the lost. It was a good gospel sermon. They had a beautiful, well-kept building. Many things that were just, well, traditional. And they were reaching no one with the gospel. They were having a hard time reaching even the children in their own families. Later in 2010, the pastor resigned, and the leaders were talking to me about what they're going to do when the church closed. In fact, what they talked about was, how do we keep up the building long enough to be able to have our funerals here? I went to their quarterly business meeting to take notes. And I was expecting to hear what a financial disaster the church must be. I mean, to see that much of a decline. And to my shock, as they began talking in the meeting, and I should say the business meeting was pretty much about money from beginning to end. Nothing about the laws. To my shock, I discovered that actually they had been meeting their budget every year. In fact, there had been surpluses every year. The reason that happened was because in order to make sure that they met their budget, they just kept cutting back on ministry. You know, if you cut back on everything you do to reach out to anyone else, it becomes fairly easy to keep meeting your budget. Church number 2, same city. 1987. And I should say this is a city about the size of St. John, about 100,000 people, a little bigger than St. John maybe. 1987, a small group met in the living room to talk about starting a church. And they had a vision. They had figured out that their county had about 80,000 unchurched people. And they said, the churches here are not reaching those people. We want to start a church. We know we can't reach 80,000 people, but could we reach 10% of them? Could we have a church that's focused on mission? That's focused on mission. That's focused not on us, not on what makes us comfortable, not on what we enjoy on Sunday morning, but could we have a church that says we want to see the Lord adding there with those who are being saved?
Amen.
Could we reach out to those who are lost? Could we reach just 10% of those people? Same city. I've been to that church 5 times now. Went there in 2010. They had grown to 2,300 people in 6 weekend services. They're trying to figure out how to make more room for other people. They have rented space in a shopping mall. They're trying to think, are there other places we can have a video venue to get more people in? Now in that same city, remember the other church? Declining. When I met with them in focus groups, they said, oh well, nobody's interested in church anymore. In the same city, this church has grown to 2,300. I said to the pastor, do you have quite a bit of financial wealth to be able to do this? The pastor looked at me and said, we run this place on a shoestring. We've never met our budget yet. I didn't mean they were being irresponsible with their money. But what he was saying was, if we had 5 extra cents, we'd be spending it. Because there's people to reach. Their focus on mission. They're primarily reaching people who did not grow up in church. As I met with people and interviewed people and met in focus groups, time after time, people would say, I didn't grow up in the church. That's who they were reaching. Society has changed. It's changed, I think, in at least 3 ways, many other ways, but 3 big ways. And sometimes we don't realize or we don't understand in our churches. The first is that we live in a very secular environment in Canada today. I think back when I began in ministry, and it seems just a few years ago, because I'm still very young. I don't understand it. It is a secular environment that we live in today. The second huge change that churches are not grasping is the extent to which community, the extent to which social life in our society is based on digital media. I mean, again, I think back to starting out as a pastor, and it meant going to visit people. In fact, I would visit pretty well everybody in the community. Just show up at their door, I'm the pastor, they would quickly run, put the teapot on, the pastor's here. It was a different world socially. Social connections today are online primarily. If you're under 35, especially if you're under 25, social connections are online primarily. When I have interviewed people in congregations, I've asked zillions of questions. They must be sick of me. But as I ask questions about digital media, as the age group gets lower, the numbers get higher and higher and higher. Among those under 25, even when I ask the question, has digital technology affected your understanding of God? The number goes way up to yes. We live in a world that is characterized by digital media. And that doesn't just mean screens in church. It doesn't just mean using digital media the way that I do as an old person, meaning somebody over 35. It means social connections. And if we are going to connect with people, if we're going to communicate the gospel with people, social media, digital media have to be in the mix. People my age say, oh, well, it's much more personal to be face-to-face. And, well, that's an old way of thinking. For somebody who's 25, it's not more personal at all. We need to be communicating the gospel using digital media. Thirdly, we live in a world where there is a sort of a postmodernist way of thinking, which means this. We can come up with the best arguments in the world to convince someone they could become a Christian. They can hear our arguments and think, this makes sense. This is true. And they will walk away if they don't see in us that there's something authentic about our faith in our life. It's not about logical arguments. It is about the life that we live. It's about the church that we are. People will not be interested in coming, unchurched people will not be interested in coming to Hillcrest Baptist Church for the program you put on, for the message you present. You will have to do with the people that you are. That's a change. I mean, I grew up in a day when people said, don't follow me, follow Jesus. Don't judge by me, judge by Jesus. Well, we live in a world where nobody's listening to that anymore because they are going to judge Jesus by us. And actually, that's pretty much the way it was, I think, in the New Testament. We need to understand that our witness, the way that we live, is what is going to, for many people, make a difference as to whether they will be interested in the gospel. It's a new social environment, and in this new social environment, traditional churches are dying, and they're going to close, and they are closing. And so I hear people in churches that are dying say, well, all churches are closing, nobody's interested in the gospel anymore, which is far from true. There are lots of missional churches. There are lots of churches that are concerned about the gospel. There are lots of churches that are willing to make changes. Not to change to be more like what the world likes. I don't mean that. Churches that are willing to change in order to go back to the New Testament. And be not a church that is focused on 1970, but a church that's focused on the first century. How do we be the church that Jesus called? How do we, in a sense, put aside 20 centuries of how we learned to to be church and start over again and say, how do we follow Jesus? How do we do what Jesus has called us to do? Not what people want us to do, not what people like us to do, not what people expect us to do. How do we do what Jesus has called us to do? How do we be the church that Jesus wants us to be? And you don't need to know the particulars of my research, except that it really was research. As a sociologist, I'm interested in social factors that contribute to the decline of congregations. And I just want to focus on what happens when the social environment changes, because that's what's happening in Canada very quickly. Healthy social organizations, and again, I'm not just talking about churches, but I think it certainly applies in churches. Healthy social organizations focus on both internal and external environment. So when things are going well, a healthy social organization says, how do we make sure we're meeting the needs of people who are part of our organization, and how do we continue to be effective in reaching out to those around us? But there are sometimes big social changes that take place. And when that happens, healthy organizations focus on internal changes. Healthy organizations say, how do we need to change what we do on the inside so that we are still effective reaching out to those around us? Unhealthy organizations do the opposite. Unhealthy organizations say, we've got to protect ourselves from those changes that are taking place in the world around us. We've got to put the walls up higher. We've got to put up bigger barriers to protect ourselves, to make sure that we don't have to change who we are and what we do. And I'm afraid that's what many churches are doing. They're saying, look at this world and what's changing. We had better build thicker walls. We had better stay away from those people. We had better find ways to protect the way we've always done things. And by putting up those walls, yes, we may protect ourselves. But it means the gospel does not get outside of our walls either. We live in a time of change, and what churches need to do is say, how do we change what we're doing here? How do we change us so that we can better reach the people that Jesus has called the church to reach? Many congregations are not responding to the changed social environment in ways that really will bring about effective witness. Many congregations are so concerned about maintaining the things that have always been. As the meeting began, the moderator said to talk about ways more money. If you're better not to pay the bill, just close the place. Because there's no ministry taking place. We've imported improper, faithless attitudes toward the way that we do things in church. Finances are so important. It's important that they're done well and that it's done with integrity. But the mission must drive the finances. The finances must never drive the mission of the church. Churches need to be doing what they're doing in order to carry out the mission. I mean, I'll give you a quick example. As I've talked to people in declining congregations, one of the common things they'll say to me is, oh, we need more people because we need more giving. That's a church where the finances are driving the mission instead of the mission driving the finances. The point is not that we need to get new people in so that they will give and we won't have to give as much. The point is we need to reach people because they are lost and they need to know Jesus and they need to hear the gospel. And our finances need to facilitate that. Finances.
Amen.
Second thing is what I've called, or what sociologists call, bridging versus bonding. And that is in many of our churches, well, in many of the congregations where I met with people in focus groups, they would say, we can't understand why more people don't want to come to our church. We are such a loving family. We are so close. We love one another. And it was obvious. But what they didn't realize was that because they were so close, they made anybody new feel like an outsider. They were building no bridges to other people. All of their close friends were church members. They weren't seeking to build friendships, to build opportunities, to reach out, to care for people, toward people who were not part of the church. No bridges, only those close bonds. In our churches, we must be bridging to the community, individually and corporately. How do we socially connect with people around us? Third thing is digital media. I've talked about that. It's just important to realize that many times old people who are 36 and older do not understand how digital media clearly progress people. People signing church, when I went and talked to them, they would say, oh yeah, we give get their hands dirty. They are out dealing with broken, hurting people. We need to do that. The fifth thing is crisis. Churches would say, well, I already said, the church council meeting, we can't talk about ministry because we've got a financial crisis here. I would see in the church bulletin, it would say something like, if things don't change here in the next month, the church is going to close. Well, it's like this. I don't know about your life, but many people I talk to have plenty of crisis in their family, in their workplace, in their health, in lots of ways. When they come to church, they're not looking for another crisis. And I think sometimes church leaders think, well, if we get people thinking there's a big crisis, that will motivate them to change. I tell you what it will motivate them to do. It'll motivate them to not come to church. It just discourages people. Listen, there is no crisis, folks. God is God.
Amen.
There is no crisis. We need to trust Him. We need to do what He's called us to do. Gender issues. The world has changed, folks. Society has changed. And somehow people walk into a church and think, oh, look, 1950 all over again. We live in a world where society has changed, and we need to know how to respond to those issues in our church. And I've already talked about this, but let me say one other thing, and that is this. Many congregations make secularization a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're the ones that say, well, nobody's interested in church anymore. And it becomes self-fulfilling. They comfort themselves in the fact that there's no sense being a witness. There's no sense trying to reach out because they're not interested anyways. Well, if we don't witness to them, if we don't tell them the good news, obviously they're not going to be interested. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that makes us feel, well, we're okay here. We can pat ourselves on the back. We're keeping things going in the secular world. When in fact, we're just not doing what God's called us to do. Quickly, some lessons as I close. Pastors and congregations need to understand and connect with their communities so they know how to communicate the gospel effectively to secular people. And that shouldn't be hard. Jesus did it. They did it in the New Testament. When the Apostle Paul went to the continent of Europe, he didn't find people who said, oh yes, we all grew up in Sunday school. They were reaching people who had no idea of the gospel before him. We need to do the same thing. Ministries and churches must not be based on 20th century social models. Society is not a 20th century society. The biblical mission of the church to go and make disciples needs to relate to 21st century social realities. Churches in Canada are being especially effective in reaching younger adults. And there are a variety of reasons for this. One of the reasons, I think, is that we're not very good at reaching young adults until they marry and have children. We've tended to say, well, once they get married and have children, then they'll come to church because they have kids and we'll have kids programs. The fact is, in Canada, the average age of marriage has gone up by 6 years. Do you realize that? Just over the last couple of decades. It means that most Canadians don't marry until they're around 30 years old. We need to be reaching young adults. We need to be reaching young adults. They need real answers to today's issues because the world has changed. And today's issues are not the same issues as when I was a down to that. I look at my kids. My kids are both in their 20s. And I realize, and I think everyone my age needs to realize, I never lived in the world that they lived in. I was never their age. I was never their age. What it means to be in their 20s today is entirely different than what it meant for me. If I say to either of my kids, well, you know, back when I was your age, you know, the eyes are going to start to roll, and rightly so. Because I was really never their age. The world they live in is so totally different from the world. And honestly, that's a huge difference. I mean, my parents lived in a world, yes, you know, there were differences in technology and so on. But socially, the world my parents grew up in was quite similar to the world I grew up in. That is not true today. If we're going to reach young adults, we need to understand their world. Think about the 20th century. It was characterized by the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and the Vietnam War just across the border from us. Communist expansion, all the long fears of that. The Cold War, nuclear threats, remember the Cuban crisis. And in the midst of that 20th century social environment, what did it mean to be an effective church? It meant being a traditional place. Being a place where you can feel safe and calm and know that in spite of all those dangerous things that are happening, the church is a place where things won't change that much. The 20th century is over. Churches that focus on buildings and finances and traditions and heritage are going to die. Churches that return to the biblical mission and apply it to a digitally connected, increasingly secular society, those are the churches that are seeing God at work in amazing ways. You see, it's a choice that churches didn't have to make 50 years ago. Quite traditional churches in 1970 could be very missional. Today, it's a crucial choice for churches to make. And I pray for you. Almighty God, our loving Heavenly Father, we thank you that we are your church. You have called us. We thank you that our risen and ascended Savior, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ, has told us to go, has commissioned us to go and make disciples. He has told us that we are to be witnesses. And I pray for this congregation, and I thank you for these people, for their pastor, for their leaders, for each person who's here. And I pray that they would carry out your mission faithfully. And I pray that by your Spirit you would empower them to accomplish the great things that you want to do through them. The salvation of those who are their co-workers and their neighbors and their classmates and their friends and their family. I pray this in Jesus' name.
Words of truth. Did you feel in your spirit a resonation with what he was saying? It makes sense, doesn't it? I just want to thank you so much for bringing the word. You can say that stuff and leave. So that's why I brought you here. So if you didn't like that message, you blame him. Good. You can't believe you said that at church. But he's right. I'm not even 40, and I find even some of these social media things hard to get into. And I know that I have to make a change. In fact, I think I had some conversations about different people. I know that this is a Facebook-loving church for a certain age group, and I hate Facebook. But it's okay. I have to change if I want to be relevant as a pastor. So if I have to change, guess what? So do you.